Warren Zimmerman woke to the sound of breathing that was not his own, a slow and rhythmic exhalation that drifted down through the floorboards from the hayloft above his small farmhouse bedroom. He lay perfectly still in the pre-dawn darkness, his hand instinctively moving toward the hunting knife he kept beneath his pillow, his pulse quickening as he strained to identify whether the intruder was human or beast. The war had ended 3 years ago, but old habits died hard, and this close to the borderlands, a man learned to trust his instincts before his hospitality. He rose silently from his bed, pulling on his worn trousers and boots without making a sound, years of military training guiding his movements even now. The farmhouse he had built with his own hands after returning from the war was modest but sturdy, with a small barn attached where he kept his 2 horses and stored the hay he had cut from his fields. Someone or something had taken shelter there during the night, and Warren needed to know what kind of danger he might be facing. The autumn air bit at his bare chest as he stepped outside, the sky just beginning to lighten with the faint purple promise of dawn. He moved carefully toward the barn, avoiding the spots where the ground creaked, his breath forming small clouds in the cold morning. Through the open barn door, he could see nothing unusual at first, just the familiar shapes of his horses in their stalls and the towering pile of hay he had spent the last month gathering for winter. Then he saw her. She was curled in the corner of the loft, visible through the gaps in the wooden slats, her large frame tucked into as small a space as she could manage. Even in sleep, she looked ready to bolt, one hand clutched around a makeshift weapon that appeared to be nothing more than a sturdy branch. Her skin was a deep green, darker than the spring grass but lighter than the pines that bordered his property. She wore clothes that were little more than rags, torn and stained with travel, and even from below he could see she was shivering despite being buried in loose hay. An orc. Warren's first instinct was the one that had been drilled into him during 5 years of brutal warfare: eliminate the threat. Orcs were the enemy, the monsters who had ravaged villages and killed his brothers in arms. But as he watched her sleep, he saw something that gave him pause. She was young, perhaps barely out of adolescence by orc standards, and she was alone. No war party, no weapons except that pitiful stick, and she was shaking so hard that bits of hay trembled and fell from the loft with each shudder. He stood there for a long moment, wrestling with himself. Every reasonable part of his mind told him to send her on her way, or at the very least to secure his property and wait for her to leave on her own. But there was another part of him, the part that had built this farm specifically to get away from violence and death, that could not ignore what he was seeing. She was cold. She was alone. And despite what she was, despite everything he had been taught to believe, she was just trying to survive. Warren looked down at his bare chest, feeling the cold more acutely now, and made a decision that surprised even himself. He turned and walked back toward the house, moving with purpose now rather than stealth. Inside, he went to the trunk at the foot of his bed and pulled out the thick wool blanket his mother had made him before he left for the war. It was one of his most precious possessions, having kept him warm through countless cold nights in muddy trenches and frozen encampments. The fabric was worn but still thick, still capable of holding heat. He also grabbed an old shirt and his coat, dressing properly this time, then returned to the barn with the blanket folded over his arm. The horses nickered softly as he entered, and he paused to stroke the nose of his mare, gathering his thoughts. The ladder to the loft was sturdy, built to hold the weight of a man carrying heavy bales, and he began to climb it slowly, making just enough noise that she would wake before he reached the top. The last thing he wanted was to startle her into doing something they would both regret. He was halfway up when he heard her move, a sudden scrambling that sent hay cascading down around him. He stopped climbing and looked up to find her staring down at him, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. They were amber-colored, he noticed, bright and intelligent despite the terror in them. Her tusks were small, barely protruding past her upper lip, and her black hair was tangled and matted with bits of straw. "Easy," Warren said, keeping his voice low and calm, the same tone he used with spooked horses. "I am not going to hurt you." She did not respond, just continued to stare at him, her whole body tense to run. But there was nowhere for her to go except down, and he was blocking the only ladder. "You are cold," he continued, holding up the blanket so she could see it. "I brought you this. That is all, just a blanket." Her eyes flicked from his face to the blanket and back again, suspicion and desperate hope warring in her expression. She opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it again, her tusks clicking softly against her lower lip. Warren waited, not moving from his position on the ladder. He could see her thinking, calculating, trying to determine if this was a trap. Finally, he made a decision. He climbed up 2 more rungs until his arms could reach the loft floor, then carefully placed the blanket there, within her reach but not close enough that he could grab her. "There," he said. "It is yours. I am going back down now." He descended the ladder slowly, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening. When he reached the bottom, he looked up again and saw that she had not moved, still frozen in that defensive crouch. The blanket lay between them, untouched. "I have to feed the horses," Warren said, more to fill the silence than because he thought she cared. "You can stay up there if you want, or you can go. I will not stop you either way." He turned his attention to his morning chores, measuring out oats for both horses and checking their water. He could feel her eyes on him the entire time, tracking his every movement. When he finished with the horses, he walked to the barn door and paused, looking back up toward the loft. "There is a well just outside," he said. "The water is clean, and I will leave some bread on the porch if you get hungry." Then he left, walking back to his house without looking back. His heart was pounding, and he realized his hands were shaking slightly. What had he just done? He had given comfort to the enemy, shown kindness to a creature he had been taught to kill on sight. If any of his former brothers in arms knew what he had just done, they would call him a traitor. But as he started a fire in his small hearth and began preparing his own meager breakfast, he found he did not regret it. The morning passed slowly. Warren forced himself to go about his normal routine, tending to the vegetable garden that was yielding its last harvest before winter, repairing a section of fence that had been damaged by a fallen branch, and splitting wood for the coming cold months. But his attention kept drifting back to the barn, wondering if she was still there, or if she had fled the moment he was out of sight. He kept his promise about the bread, leaving half a loaf on his porch along with a clay jug of water. When he came back from the far field an hour later, both were gone. She was still there then. The realization brought a strange mixture of relief and apprehension. Now what? He could not simply let her live in his barn indefinitely. Winter was coming, and the nights would only grow colder. And even if he could ignore the practical concerns, there was the matter of what she was doing here at all. Orcs did not travel alone, not usually. They lived in clans and tribes, moving in groups for protection and strength. For her to be by herself, especially one so young, meant something had gone very wrong. As the sun began to set, Warren made another decision. He prepared a simple stew with vegetables from his garden and some salted pork from his stores, making more than he needed. When it was ready, he ladled a generous portion into a wooden bowl and carried it out to the barn along with a spoon. This time, he did not climb the ladder. He simply set the bowl at the base of it and called up. "I made stew. It is hot. I will leave it here for you." He heard movement above, a soft rustling, but she did not appear. Warren nodded to himself and turned to leave, then paused. "My name is Warren," he said to the latter, feeling foolish but pushing forward anyway. "This is my farm. You are welcome to shelter here for the night, but tomorrow we should talk. I need to know if you are in trouble, if someone is looking for you." Still no response. Warren sighed and walked back to his house, where his own dinner was waiting. He ate slowly, his mind churning with questions and concerns. What was he getting himself into? Even if his intentions were good, harboring an orc could bring him serious trouble. If the local militia found out, or his neighbors, there would be consequences. The peace treaty that had ended the war was still new, still fragile, and trust between humans and orcs was virtually non-existent. But when he returned to the barn later that night to check on the horses before bed, he found the wooden bowl sitting clean at the base of the ladder, and the blanket was no longer where he had left it in the loft. The next morning, Warren woke before dawn again and went through his morning routine with a new sense of purpose. He fed the horses, but this time he lingered in the barn, making his presence known. After a few minutes, he heard a soft shuffling from above and looked up to find her peering down at him, wrapped in his blanket. In the early morning light streaming through the barn's gaps, he could see her more clearly. She was younger than he had initially thought, probably around 18 or 19 in human years. Her face was angular and strong, with high cheekbones and a proud jaw, but there was a softness to her features that spoke of youth and vulnerability. "Good morning," Warren said, keeping his tone neutral and calm. She watched him for a long moment, then spoke for the first time. Her voice was rough, as if from disuse or perhaps thirst, but clear. Why? It was a simple question, but loaded with meaning. Why had he helped her? Why had he not turned her away, or worse? Why was he still allowing her to stay? Warren considered his answer carefully. "Because you needed help, and because I am tired of making decisions based on fear and hate." Her amber eyes narrowed slightly, searching his face for deception. "You are human. I am orc. We are enemies." "The war is over," Warren replied. "Not for everyone," she said, and there was a weight of experience in those words that made his chest tighten. He nodded slowly. "That is fair, but it is over for me. I came out here to get away from all that, to build something instead of destroy it. So I will ask you plainly, are you here to cause me harm?" "No," she said immediately, and he believed her. "Are you running from something?" Her expression shuddered, closing off, and she pulled the blanket tighter around herself. That was answer enough. "You do not have to tell me," Warren said. "But if someone dangerous is looking for you, I need to know. This is my home, and I will defend it if I must." She was quiet for a long time, and he could see the internal struggle playing out across her face. Finally, she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "My clan cast me out. I have nowhere else to go." The simple admission hit Warren harder than he expected. To be cast out from an orc clan was a death sentence, especially for one so young. They were tribal people, dependent on their community for survival. For her to be exiled meant she had done something her people could not forgive, or perhaps simply been unlucky enough to be born into circumstances beyond her control. "Why did they cast you out?" he asked gently. Her jaw tightened, and he saw shame flicker across her features. "I spoke against our war chief. He wanted to raid human settlements, break the peace. I said it was foolish, that we had already lost too much. He called me a coward and a traitor. My own father agreed with him." Warren absorbed this information, feeling something shift in his understanding of the situation. She had not been cast out for cruelty or violence, but for advocating for peace. She had lost everything because she had tried to stop more bloodshed. "How long have you been on your own?" he asked. 2 weeks," Maybe 3. I lost count. 2 weeks alone in the wilderness with nothing but the clothes on her back and a stick for protection. The fact that she had survived at all spoke to her strength and resourcefulness. Warren made a decision that he knew would complicate his life enormously, but that felt right in his gut. You can stay. Not just for the night. Stay until you figure out what you are going to do next. I have the space and winter is coming. You will not survive out there alone. Her eyes went wide with shock. You would let me stay? Here, in the barn, he clarified quickly. I will bring you food and whatever else you need, but people cannot see you. If word got out that I am sheltering an orc, there would be trouble for both of us. Can you accept those terms? She stared at him for a long moment, and he saw tears begin to well up in her amber eyes. She blinked them back fiercely, clearly fighting to maintain her composure. Yes, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Yes, I accept. Good, Warren said, feeling a strange sense of relief wash over him. I am Warren, as I mentioned yesterday. What should I call you? Asha, she said. My name is Asha Jorah. It is good to meet you, Asha, properly I mean. He found himself smiling slightly, and was surprised to see a tentative smile in return, her small tusks catching the light. Over the following days, they settled into a careful routine. Warren would bring breakfast to the barn each morning, usually porridge or bread with whatever preserves he had. Asha would eat while he tended to the horses, and they would talk, short conversations at first that gradually grew longer as they became more comfortable with each other. He learned that she was 19 years old, that she had 2 younger brothers she missed desperately, and that she had always been considered strange by her clan for her love of quiet things like gardening and weaving rather than hunting and fighting. In turn, Warren told her about his life before the farm. He had been a soldier for 5 years, fighting in the border wars that had raged between human and orc territories. He had seen terrible things, done terrible things, and lost friends to violence that now seemed senseless and wasteful. When the peace treaty was finally signed, he had taken his military pension and bought this land, determined to live out the rest of his days in quiet solitude. Did you kill many orcs? Asha asked one morning, and he appreciated that she had the courage to voice the question that must have been haunting her. Yes, Warren said honestly, more than I can count, more than I want to remember. She was quiet for a moment, processing this. Do you regret it? Every day, he said. I told myself I was following orders, protecting my people. And maybe that was true at the time. But now, looking back, I just see waste. Young men and young orcs killing each other over land and resources that we probably could have shared if we had just been willing to talk instead of fight. My people would say you are weak for thinking that way, Asha said. Your people cast you out for thinking something similar, Warren pointed out gently. She smiled at that, a sad but genuine expression. I suppose they did. As autumn deepened into the early edges of winter, Warren found himself spending more and more time in the barn. He told himself it was practical, that he needed to prepare the space for the cold months ahead, but the truth was that he enjoyed Asha's company. She was intelligent and thoughtful, with a dry sense of humor that caught him off guard and made him laugh more than he had in years. She was also incredibly useful, insisting on helping with chores despite his protests that she should rest and conserve her strength. Together, they reinforced the barn's walls against winter winds, patched holes in the roof, and organized the hay and feed for maximum efficiency. Asha proved to be surprisingly skilled with her hands, able to weave and repair things with a deftness that impressed him. When he mentioned this, she ducked her head in what he was learning to recognize as her version of a blush, the green of her skin deepening slightly. My mother taught me, she said. She said every orc should know how to make and mend things, not just break them. My father always said it was a waste of time, that I should focus on weapons training instead. Your mother sounds wise, Warren said. She was, Asher replied, and the past tense was not lost on him. She died when I was 15. Illness took her. After that, my father became harder, angrier. I think he blamed the world for taking her, and he wanted to strike back at something, anything. Warren understood that kind of grief, the kind that curdled into rage and violence. He had seen it in fellow soldiers who had lost too much and no longer cared whether they lived or died. It was a dangerous thing, that kind of pain. I am sorry you lost her, he said simply. Thank you, Asher replied, and they continued working in comfortable silence. It was 3 weeks into Asher's stay when Warren's nearest neighbor, a gruff farmer named Thomas Winters, stopped by unexpectedly. Warren was in the barn at the time, helping Asher practice reading using an old book he had found in his trunk. At the sound of hoofbeats approaching, they both froze. Stay here, Warren said urgently, already moving toward the ladder. Do not make a sound. He climbed down quickly and stepped out of the barn just as Thomas was dismounting from his horse. The older man raised a hand in greeting, his weathered face creasing into a smile. Warren, good to see you. I was passing by and thought I would check in, see how you are preparing for winter. Thomas, Warren said, forcing himself to sound casual and relaxed despite the racing of his heart. I am well, thank you, just doing some work in the barn. Need any help? Thomas asked, already starting to move in that direction. No, Warren said, too quickly and too loudly. Thomas stopped and gave him a puzzled look. Warren scrambled for a reasonable explanation. That is, I appreciate the offer, but I am just reorganizing some things. Very boring work, but I could use some advice on my north fence if you have a moment. Thomas looked like he might argue, but finally nodded. Sure, let us take a look. Warren led him away from the barn, making a show of pointing out various sections of fence that needed attention or repair. He kept Thomas engaged for nearly an hour, asking questions about winter preparations and discussing crop yields and livestock prices. Finally, Thomas seemed satisfied and mounted his horse to leave. You are doing good work here, Warren, the older man said. Your farm is coming along nicely. If you need anything this winter, you know where to find me. I appreciate that, Thomas. Thank you. When Thomas was finally out of sight, Warren returned to the barn and found Asher still hidden in the loft, the blanket pulled over her head for extra concealment. He is gone, Warren said, and she emerged slowly, her face pale beneath the green. That was close, she said, her voice shaking slightly. Too close, Warren agreed. We need to be more careful. If anyone finds out you are here, it will not end well for either of us. From that day forward, they were more cautious. Warren would only enter the barn when he was certain no one was around, and Asher stayed completely hidden during daylight hours, only moving about when darkness fell. It was a stressful way to live, but they managed. As November turned into December, the first snow fell. Warren woke to find the world transformed into white silence, and his first thought was of Asher in the barn. He dressed quickly and hurried out, finding her wrapped in not just his blanket but also piles of hay, shivering despite her best efforts to stay warm. This will not do, he said, assessing the situation with a critical eye. It is only going to get colder. I will manage, Asher said through chattering teeth, but they both knew that was not true. Warren spent the rest of the day winterizing the loft as best he could. He brought out all his spare blankets, of which there were precious few, and fashioned a kind of nest in the corner where Asher slept. He also brought out a small brazier that he used for heating metal when doing repair work, along with some coal to burn in it. You need to be very careful with this, he instructed, showing her how to manage the brazier safely. Only use it at night when no one will see the smoke, and make sure the barn door is cracked for ventilation. I do not want you freezing to death, but I also do not want the barn catching fire." "I understand," Asha said, and he could see genuine gratitude in her eyes. "Warren, I do not know how to thank you for everything you have done." He shook his head. "You do not need to thank me. Just stay safe and stay hidden. That is enough." But as he trudged back to his house through the deepening snow, he wondered at the truth of his own words. Was it really enough? He found himself worrying about her constantly, wondering if she was warm enough, fed enough, safe enough. She had been living in his barn for over a month now, and somewhere along the way she had stopped being just an orc he was helping and had become something more. A friend, certainly. But if he was honest with himself, his feelings were growing into something deeper and more complicated than friendship. The thought terrified him. Winter deepened, and with it came a forced intimacy between Warren and Asha. The weather made it too dangerous for him to stay away from the barn for long periods, as he needed to check on the horses and make sure Asha had everything she needed. They began sharing meals more regularly, Warren bringing his own dinner out to the barn so they could eat together in the warmth of the loft. It was during one of these evening meals, as the wind howled outside and the brazier glowed warmly between them, that Asha asked him about his family. "Do you have anyone?" she asked. "Brothers, sisters, parents?" Warren was quiet for a moment, chewing his food thoughtfully. "I had a brother," he said finally, "younger than me by 3 years. His name was Marcus. He died in the war." "I am sorry," Asha said softly. "He was killed in a raid on our camp. Orc warriors came in the night, and Marcus was on watch duty. He died trying to sound the alarm and give the rest of us time to arm ourselves." Warren stared into the brazier, seeing flames from a different fire, a different time. "I blamed all orcs for his death for a long time. I think that is why I fought so hard, why I was so ruthless. I wanted revenge." "And now?" Asha asked. "Now I realize that the orcs who killed Marcus were probably just following orders, just trying to survive, same as we were. Maybe they had brothers too. Maybe they lost people they loved. The whole thing was just senseless violence feeding on itself, creating more hate and more death." He looked up at her, meeting her amber eyes. "I am done with hate. I am done with revenge. I just want to live in peace." Asha reached out slowly, as if giving him time to pull away, and placed her hand over his. Her palm was warm and calloused from work, and Warren found himself turning his hand over to hold hers properly. They sat like that for a long moment, hands joined, the simple contact speaking volumes that words could not. "I think your brother would be proud of the man you have become," Asha said finally. "I hope so," Warren replied. It was that night, lying alone in his bed in the house while Asha slept in the barn, that Warren admitted to himself what he had been trying to deny for weeks. He was falling in love with her. It was absurd, impossible, and completely real. He loved the way she laughed at his terrible jokes. He loved her strength and her gentleness, her fierce spirit that had not been broken despite everything she had endured. He loved the way she looked at the world with hope, despite having every reason to be bitter and angry. But what could he do about it? Even if she felt the same way, which was far from certain, they lived in a world that would never accept them. Humans and orcs did not fall in love. They did not build lives together. The very idea was taboo, possibly even illegal depending on how one interpreted the peace treaty. Warren lay awake for hours, wrestling with his feelings and trying to talk himself out of them. By the time dawn came, he had convinced himself that the best course of action was to do nothing, to keep his feelings private and maintain the status quo. It was safer that way, for both of them. But the heart rarely listens to reason. December gave way to January, and the depths of winter settled over the farm. Warren had never been so grateful for his thorough preparations. He had enough food stored for himself and Asha, enough fuel to keep them warm, and enough fodder for the horses to last until spring. They were effectively isolated from the outside world, cut off by snow and cold, and while it should have felt oppressive, Warren found himself oddly content. His days took on a pleasant rhythm. Morning chores with the horses, breakfast with Asha in the loft, various farm maintenance tasks throughout the day, and evenings spent in conversation or comfortable silence. Asha had taken to the books he brought her with enthusiasm, proving to be a quick learner. She could now read simple texts with only occasional help, and she had begun teaching herself to write as well, practicing letters in a notebook he had given her. "Why did you never learn before?" Warren asked one evening as he watched her painstakingly copy a passage from one of his books. "Orcs do not value reading and writing the way humans do," Asha explained. "We have oral traditions, stories passed down through generations. My clan thought books were for weak humans who could not remember their own history." "But you wanted to learn," Warren observed. "I have always wanted to learn," Asha admitted. "My mother used to tell me stories about the old days before the wars, when orcs and humans sometimes traded and even worked together. I wanted to understand humans, to see if peace was possible. That is why I spoke against the war chief. I thought if we could just stop fighting long enough to remember what we had in common, we could build something better." "That is a beautiful dream," Warren said. "It is a foolish dream," Asha replied, but there was no bitterness in her voice, only sadness. "Look at us. You are a good man, Warren, one of the best I have ever known. And yet I have to hide in your barn like a criminal because of what I am. If your neighbors knew you were helping me, they would drive you out or worse. That is the world we live in." Warren wanted to argue, to insist that things could change, but he knew she was right. The prejudice and fear ran too deep on both sides. It would take generations to heal if it ever healed at all. "Maybe it is foolish," he said finally. "But I would rather be a fool with hope than a cynic with nothing." Asha looked up at him, and something passed between them, a current of understanding and shared longing. Warren felt his resolve to keep his feelings hidden begin to crumble. "What was the point of protecting his heart when it was already lost?" "Asha," he began, then stopped, unsure how to continue. "Yes," she prompted, setting down her pen and giving him her full attention. Warren took a deep breath, gathering his courage. "These past months with you have been important to me. You have become important to me. More than just someone I am helping. I need you to know that." He watched as understanding dawned in her eyes, followed quickly by something that looked like fear. She stood up abruptly, wrapping her arms around herself. "Warren, do not say what I think you are about to say." "Why not?" he asked, standing as well. "If we are both feeling the same thing, why should we not acknowledge it? Because it is impossible," Asha said, her voice rising with distress. "Because even if I feel the same way, and I am not saying I do, there is no future in it. You know that as well as I do." "I know what the world tells us," Warren said, moving closer to her. "But I am tired of letting the world make my decisions for me. I have spent too much of my life doing what I was told, believing what I was taught to believe. For once, I want to choose for myself." "And you choose this? You choose me?" Asha asked, and there was a vulnerability in her voice that broke his heart. "Warren, I am an orc. I am the enemy. I am everything you were trained to hate and kill." "You are Asha," Warren said simply. "You are kind and strong and brave. You are someone who lost everything because you chose peace over violence. You are the person who makes me laugh and makes me think and makes me want to be better than I was. That is who you are to me." Tears were streaming down her face now, tracking through the green of her skin. You do not know what you are saying. You do not understand what you would be giving up. Then help me understand, Warren said, reaching out to take her hands in his. Talk to me, Asha. Tell me what you are thinking. She looked down at their joined hands, hers so much larger than his, the contrast between green and pale so stark. I am thinking that I have dreamed of hearing those words from someone, anyone, for my entire life. I am thinking that I never imagined it would be a human, a former soldier, someone who by all rights should despise me. And I am thinking that I am terrified because I feel the same way about you, and I do not know how to make this work. Warren felt his heart soar at her admission, even as his mind raced with the same concerns she was voicing. We will figure it out, he said. Together, we have made it this far, have we not? Asha laughed through her tears, a wet and slightly hysterical sound. You are insane. This is insane. Probably, Warren agreed. But I have made my choice. Now you need to make yours. Do you want this? Do you want to try despite everything? She looked up at him, her amber eyes searching his face as if trying to memorize every detail. Then, slowly, she nodded. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I want to try. Warren pulled her into his arms, and she came willingly, her head tucking against his chest despite the awkward difference in their heights. He could feel her shaking, whether from cold or emotion he could not tell. So he held her tighter, trying to convey through touch everything he felt, but could not adequately express with words. They stood like that for a long time, just holding each other in the dim light of the brazier, the wind howling outside but unable to reach them in their small haven. Eventually, they settled back down onto the hay, sitting close together, and Warren wrapped one of the blankets around both of them. What do we do now? Asha asked, her voice small and uncertain. I do not know, Warren admitted, but we have all winter to figure it out. For now, let us just be together. Is that enough? For now, Asha said, resting her head on his shoulder. For now, it is enough. The weeks that followed were among the happiest of Warren's life, despite the continued need for secrecy and caution. He and Asha settled into their new dynamic with surprising ease, the romantic element simply adding another layer to the friendship they had already built. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing stories and dreams and fears. They laughed together, worked together, and spent quiet evenings reading or simply enjoying each other's presence. Warren taught Asha about human farming techniques, and she taught him about orcish herbalism and natural medicine. She showed him how to make a poultice that eased the ache in his old war wounds, and he showed her how to bake bread that rose light and fluffy, instead of sitting like stones in the stomach. They were building something together, a small world that was just theirs, untouched by the prejudices and conflicts of the larger world. But reality has a way of intruding on even the most carefully constructed havens. It was late February when Thomas Winters came by again, this time bringing news that turned Warren's blood cold. There had been reports of an orc sighting in the area, a lone female seen scavenging near one of the neighboring farms. The local militia was organizing search parties, and they would be checking all the farms and properties in the vicinity. They will probably be by in the next day or two, Thomas warned. Just wanted to give you a heads up. Make sure your property is secure. Keep your weapons handy. Probably nothing to worry about, but best to be prepared. Warren thanked him with a calmness he did not feel and watched the older man ride away. Then he ran to the barn. Asha was in the loft, and she looked up with a smile that faded the moment she saw his face. What is wrong? Someone saw you, Warren said without preamble. Or saw an orc, at least. The militia is organizing searches. They are going to check every farm, including this one. The color drained from Asha's face. When? Could be tomorrow, could be the day after. I do not know exactly. Warren paced the loft, his mind racing. We need a plan. We need to hide you somewhere they will not think to look. Warren, where am I going to hide that they will not find me? Asha asked, and there was a resignation in her voice that terrified him. I am too big to fit in a cupboard, and there are not exactly many places to hide on a farm this size. The root cellar, Warren said suddenly. It is underground, accessed from inside the house. If we move some of the stored vegetables to cover the door, they might not even realize it is there. And if they do find it, Asha asked. They will not, Warren said with more confidence than he felt. But even if they did, I would tell them I did not know you were there, that you must have snuck in without my knowledge. They would not believe you. Maybe not, but it would give you time to run while they were dealing with me. No, Asha said firmly. I will not let you take the fall for me. If they find me, I will tell them you had nothing to do with it. And I will contradict you, Warren shot back. We can argue about this later. Right now, we need to act. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Warren cleared out his root cellar as much as possible, leaving only enough stored food that its absence would not look suspicious. He brought down blankets and water, some books for Asha to read, and a chamber pot since she would not be able to leave once she was hidden. It was a miserable accommodation, cold and dark and cramped, but it was the best option they had. That night, they sat together in the barn one last time, neither of them wanting to acknowledge that this might be goodbye. Promise me something, Asha said as they huddled together for warmth. If they find me, if things go wrong, promise me you will not do anything foolish. Do not throw your life away trying to protect me. I cannot promise that, Warren said honestly. If it comes down to a choice between your life and mine, I am choosing yours, every time. That is exactly the kind of foolish thing I am talking about, Asha said, but there was no real anger in her voice, only sorrow and love. Asha, you need to understand something. You are not just some orc I took pity on. You are the woman I love. I will not apologize for that, and I will not stand by and watch you be hurt if there is anything I can do to prevent it. She turned to face him fully, her amber eyes shining with unshed tears. You love me. I love you, Warren confirmed, saying the words out loud for the first time. I love you, and I know the timing is terrible, but I needed you to hear it. Whatever happens tomorrow or the next day, I needed you to know. I love you too, Asha whispered. I have loved you for weeks now, maybe longer. I was just too afraid to say it. They kissed then, a gentle meeting of lips that quickly deepened into something more passionate and desperate. They held each other through the night, memorizing the feel of skin on skin, the sound of heartbeats and breathing, everything that made the other real and precious. When dawn came, they moved Asha to the root cellar. Warren helped her down the ladder and made sure she had everything she needed. I will come check on you as soon as they leave, he promised. Just stay quiet no matter what you hear. I will, Asha said. Warren, I love you. I love you too, he replied, then closed the cellar door and covered it with crates of potatoes. The militia arrived the next morning, a group of 6 men on horseback led by Thomas Winters. Warren greeted them calmly, offering cooperation and even inviting them to search his property. We will take you up on that, Thomas said, dismounting. Nothing personal, Warren, but we have to check everywhere. I understand, Warren said. Search wherever you need to. They went through everything. The barn, the house, the sheds, even the outhouse. Warren's heart was pounding so hard he was sure they could hear it, but he maintained an expression of calm cooperation. When they got to the house, he held his breath as they walked over the very spot where the root cellar door was hidden beneath the crates. One of the younger militiamen paused. What is under here? Just my root cellar, Warren said casually. Full of potatoes and turnips. Not very exciting, I am afraid. The young man looked like he might insist on checking, but Thomas waved him off. I helped Warren dig that cellar myself. It has been there since before he built the house. No way an orc is hiding down there. Warren silently blessed Thomas for his unwitting assistance, even as guilt gnawed at him for the deception. The search continued for another hour, but they found nothing. Finally, Thomas gathered his men to leave. Sorry for the intrusion, Warren. Looks like the orc moved on from this area. We will keep looking, but I think she was probably just passing through. I hope you find her, Warren lied smoothly. Cannot be too careful. When they were finally gone, Warren waited another hour to be absolutely certain before opening the root cellar. Asha climbed out, stiff and cold but unharmed. It worked, she said, sounding almost surprised. It worked, Warren agreed, pulling her into a tight embrace. But they both knew this was not over. The militia would continue their searches, and there would always be the risk of discovery. Something had to change. Over the next week, Warren and Asha discussed their options. None of them were good. Asha could try to find another orc settlement that might take her in, but there was no guarantee she would be welcomed, and the journey would be dangerous. Warren could try to take her somewhere more remote, deeper into the wilderness, but that would mean abandoning his farm and the life he had built. What if we just stayed? Asha suggested one evening. What if we told people the truth? They would drive us out, Warren said. Or worse. You know they would. Maybe, Asha conceded, but maybe not. You are respected here, Warren. Your neighbors like you. If anyone could make them understand, it would be you. That is a huge risk, Warren said. Living is a risk, Asha countered. Hiding is a risk. At least if we are honest, we are taking control of our own fate instead of letting fear make our decisions. Warren considered her words carefully. She was right, in a way. They could not live like this forever, always looking over their shoulders, always afraid of discovery. At some point, they would have to make a choice about what kind of life they wanted to live. Let me think about it, he said finally. But Asha, if we do this, if we go public with our relationship, there will be consequences, serious ones. You need to be prepared for that. I know, she said. But I would rather face those consequences with you than spend the rest of my life hiding. Winter began to loosen its grip as March arrived, bringing with it the first signs of spring. The snow melted, revealing brown earth eager for planting, and the days grew noticeably longer. Warren began planning his spring planting, discussing with Asha what crops they should prioritize. Asha had asked, a tentative hope in her voice. Warren confirmed. If you are staying, and I hope you are, then this farm belongs to both of us. It was that conversation that finally solidified Warren's decision. He wanted a life with Asha, a real life, not one lived in shadows and secrecy. And if that meant facing the prejudice and anger of his neighbors, then so be it. He had faced worse things in the war. On the first warm day of spring, Warren rode to Thomas Winter's farm. It was time to start laying the groundwork for the truth. Thomas, he said when the older man greeted him, I need to talk to you about something. It is important. They sat on Thomas's porch, and Warren chose his words carefully. You know I came out here to get away from the war, to find some peace. I do, Thomas said. And I think you have done well for yourself. You have a good farm, Warren. I have, Warren agreed. But I have also found something else, someone else, and I need to know if I can count on you as a friend, regardless of who that person is. Thomas's expression grew wary. What are you telling me, Warren? I am telling you that I have been sheltering someone this winter. The orc the militia was looking for. She has been living on my property since autumn. Thomas stood up abruptly, his face flushing with anger. You have been hiding an orc. Are you insane? Maybe, Warren said calmly, but before you judge, I need you to listen. Her name is Asha, and she was cast out from her clan for speaking against raiding human settlements. She wanted peace, and her own people rejected her for it. When she came to my farm, she was starving and freezing, and I made a choice to help her. That was a damned foolish choice, Thomas said, but some of the heat had left his voice. It was the right choice, Warren countered. Thomas, I know you. You are a good man, a fair man. If an injured dog showed up on your doorstep, you would not turn it away. Why should this be different? Because she is not a dog, Warren. She is an orc. She is a person, Warren said firmly. A person who has never harmed anyone, who only wants to live in peace. And more than that, she is someone I have come to care deeply about. I love her, Thomas. I am in love with her. Thomas sat back down heavily, as if the wind had been knocked out of him. You are in love with an orc. I am in love with a Shah, Warren corrected. And I am telling you this because I value your friendship and your opinion. I am not asking for your approval, but I am hoping for your understanding, or at least your discretion. Thomas was quiet for a long time, staring out at his own fields. Finally, he spoke. My son died in the war. Did I ever tell you that? No, Warren said softly. I did not know. I am sorry. He was killed by orc raiders. They burned our village, killed anyone who stood in their way. For a long time, I hated every orc that ever existed. I would have killed them all if I could. Thomas turned to look at Warren. But then the war ended and the hate did not go away. It just festered inside me, making me bitter and angry at the whole world. It took me years to realize that holding on to that hate was only hurting me. It was not bringing my son back. Warren waited, sensing there was more. I am not saying I am comfortable with this, Thomas continued. I am not saying I understand how you could love one of them. But I also know that you are a good man, Warren, and you would not do something like this lightly. So I will keep your secret, and I will not call the militia on you. But you need to understand that not everyone will be as understanding as I am. If this gets out, there will be trouble. I know, Warren said. But thank you, Thomas. Your support means more than you know. Over the following weeks, Warren had similar conversations with his other closest neighbors. Reactions varied from confusion to outrage to cautious acceptance, but ultimately, no one turned them in. Word began to spread slowly through the small farming community, and Warren braced himself for backlash that never quite materialized the way he expected. There were certainly those who disapproved, who made their displeasure known through cold shoulders and refusals to trade. But there were also those who were curious, who asked to meet a Shah and see for themselves what kind of orc would choose peace over war. Warren allowed these meetings, always staying close to protect a Shah from any potential violence, but she proved more than capable of winning people over with her quiet dignity and obvious sincerity. One of the most surprising allies they found was a young woman named Margaret Wright, who lived with her husband on a farm 2 miles down the road. She came to visit one day and asked to speak with a Shah privately. My sister fell in love with an orc man during the war, she told them both once Warren had been convinced to give them space. They had to keep it secret, and when she got pregnant, my parents disowned her. She and her orc husband went north, to the border regions where mixed couples are more accepted. I have not seen her in 5 years, but she writes to me sometimes. She is happy, and her children are beautiful. I just wanted you to know that there are places where you could be together openly, if that is something you want. Shah and Warren discussed Margaret's revelation late into the night. The idea of leaving, of starting over somewhere new where they would not have to constantly justify their relationship, was tempting. But it was also frightening. This farm was Warren's home, the place he had built with his own hands. Leaving it would mean abandoning everything he had worked for. I do not want you to give up your home for me, Shah said. This place is just land and buildings, Warren replied. You are my home now. If we need to leave to be happy, then we will leave. But you do not want to, Asha observed. I do not know what I want, Warren admitted. I want us to be safe. I want us to be happy. I want to live in a world where we do not have to choose between the two. Then let us try to make that world, Asha said. Right here. We have already started with Thomas and Margaret and the others who have accepted us. Maybe if we stay, if we show people that love can exist between our kinds, we can help change things. That is a lot of responsibility to take on, Warren said. Good thing there are two of us to carry it, Asha replied with a small smile. Spring turned to summer, and Warren and Asha worked the farm together. They planted crops, tended the animals, and made repairs to the property. Asha proved to be an excellent farmer, her strength and stamina allowing her to work long hours without tiring. Together, they were able to accomplish far more than Warren ever could have alone. People began to notice. When they went to the market in the nearest town, they drew stares and whispers, but no violence. Some merchants refused to trade with them, but others were willing, especially once they saw the quality of their goods. Warren's vegetables had always been good, but with Asha's knowledge of orcish agricultural techniques, they were exceptional. Where did you learn to make things grow like this? One merchant asked, examining a basket of tomatoes that were perfectly ripe and unblemished. My partner taught me, Warren said, gesturing to Asha, who stood quietly beside him. She has knowledge that I did not, and together we are learning from each other. The merchant looked at Asha with frank curiosity. You are the orc everyone is talking about. I am Asha, she replied evenly. And yes, I am an orc. Well, I do not care what you are as long as you keep producing vegetables like these, the merchant said pragmatically. I will take your entire stock, and I will pay premium price for it. It was a small victory, but it felt significant. They were being accepted, at least by some, not despite their differences, but because they were producing something of value together. That night, as they lay together in the loft that had become their shared space, Asha turned to Warren with a serious expression. I want to marry you, she said without preamble. Warren blinked, caught off guard by the sudden declaration. What? I want to marry you, Asha repeated. I know it is not traditional. I know it might not even be legal, but I want us to be bound together in every way that matters. Will you marry me? Warren Zimmerman. Warren felt emotion well up in his chest, joy and love and a fierce protectiveness that took his breath away. Yes, he said, his voice rough with feeling. Yes, Asha Jorah, I will marry you. They kissed, and it tasted like promises and futures and hope. The question became how to actually accomplish a marriage between a human and an orc when no church would perform the ceremony and no government would recognize it. In the end, they decided to create their own ritual, drawing from both human and orcish traditions. Margaret and her husband agreed to stand as witnesses, as did Thomas, who admitted he was curious to see how such a thing would be done. They held the ceremony on Warren's farm, in the field where they had planted their crops together. There was no priest, no official documentation, just two people declaring their love and commitment to each other in front of those who mattered most. Warren spoke vows promising to honor and protect Asha for all his days. Asha spoke vows promising to stand beside Warren through whatever challenges came, to build a life and a future together. They exchanged simple rings that Warren had forged himself from iron, bands that represented the strength and permanence of their bond. When it was done, Thomas clapped Warren on the shoulder. Well, you are a married man now, even if no government will say so. Congratulations, I think. Thank you, Thomas, Warren said and meant it. The older man's presence and acceptance meant the world. Margaret hugged them both. My sister will be so happy to hear about this. I will write to her tonight. Who knows, maybe one day you can visit them up north, meet others like you." "Maybe," Asha said, but she was looking at Warren and her amber eyes were full of joy. "But right now, we are exactly where we want to be." The first year of their marriage was not easy. They faced discrimination and prejudice from many quarters, and there were times when Warren wondered if they had made the right choice in staying. But there were also moments of profound beauty and connection, times when the love between them felt strong enough to withstand anything the world might throw at them. They established a routine and a rhythm to their life. Warren taught Asha more about reading and writing, and she became proficient enough to keep the farm's accounts and records. Asha taught Warren about orcish culture and traditions, giving him insight into a world he had only ever seen as an enemy. In the second year, they expanded the farm, purchasing additional land from a neighbor who was retiring. The extra acreage allowed them to plant more diverse crops and even start a small orchard. It was hard work, but they tackled it together, and there was satisfaction in seeing the results of their labor. More importantly, they were slowly building acceptance in the community. It was not universal, and there were still those who would have nothing to do with them, but the circle of people willing to trade with them, to speak with them as equals, to invite them to community gatherings, gradually expanded. One day in their third year together, a young human man showed up at their farm leading an orc woman by the hand. They were both barely out of adolescence and they looked terrified. "Are you Warren and Asha?" the young man asked. "We are," Warren confirmed. "We heard about you," the orc woman said, her voice trembling. "We heard there was a place where a human and orc could be together. Is it true?" Warren and Asha looked at each other, and a whole conversation passed between them in that glance. They had not asked to become symbols or pioneers, but apparently they had become both. "It is true," Asha said gently, "but it is not easy. You will face opposition and hardship." "We already are," the young man said. "Her clan wants to kill me and my family has disowned me." "We have nowhere else to go," Warren sighed, but it was not an unhappy sound. "Well then, I suppose you had better come inside. We will figure something out." And they did. The young couple, whose names were Peter and Greta, stayed with them for several months. Warren helped Peter learn farming while Asha worked with Greta on navigating human society. When they were ready, Warren helped them find a small plot of land not too far away, and they started their own farm. Over the years, there were others. Refugees from prejudice and hatred, seeking the same hope that Warren and Asha had found. Some stayed, some moved on, but all were welcomed. The area around Warren's farm slowly became known as a place of tolerance, where humans and orcs could coexist peacefully. It was in their 5th year together that Asha came to Warren with news that changed everything. "I am pregnant," she said, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. Warren felt his heart stop and then start again, racing with a mixture of joy and terror. "Are you certain?" "I am certain," Asha said. "I have known for a few weeks, but I wanted to be sure before I told you. Warren, we are going to have a child." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. A child. They were going to be parents. The implications were enormous, the challenges ahead potentially insurmountable, but in that moment, all he could feel was overwhelming happiness. "We are going to have a family," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "We are already a family," Asha corrected gently. "But yes, we are going to expand it." The pregnancy was not easy. Asha experienced sickness and discomfort, and there were no doctors who knew how to care for a pregnant orc, let alone one carrying a half-human child. They relied on Asha's knowledge of orcish midwifery and on Margaret, who had experience with human births. It was a learning process for everyone involved. In the depths of winter, after a labor that lasted nearly a full day, Asha gave birth to a daughter. The baby was perfect, with skin that was a lighter shade of green than her mother's, tiny tusks that were barely visible, and Warren's blue eyes. They named her Sarah after Warren's mother. Holding his daughter for the first time, Warren felt something shift inside him. This tiny person was proof that love could transcend boundaries, that something beautiful could be created from what the world said was impossible. Sarah was hope made flesh, and he vowed to protect her and give her the best life he possibly could. As Sarah grew, it became clear that she would face challenges that neither of her parents could fully shield her from. She was neither fully human nor fully orc, belonging completely to neither world. But she was also loved fiercely, not just by Warren and Asha, but by the growing community of mixed families that had formed around them. By the time Sarah was 5 years old, there were a dozen mixed couples living in the area, and more arrived each year. They established a small school where children of all backgrounds could learn together. They created traditions that honored both human and orcish cultures. They built something new, something that did not erase their pasts, but created space for a different kind of future. Warren was older now, his dark hair showing streaks of gray, his body bearing the marks of hard work and harder living. But he had never been happier. Each morning, he woke up next to the woman he loved. Each day, he worked land that was truly his own, building something that would outlast him. Each evening, he played with his daughter and told her stories about bravery and kindness and the importance of choosing love over fear. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Warren and Asha stood together in the field where they had first planted crops as partners. Sarah was playing nearby, chasing butterflies with the abandon of childhood. The farm had grown substantially, now encompassing several hundred acres. The original small house had been expanded to accommodate their growing family and occasional visitors. "You ever regret it?" Warren asked Asha, watching their daughter play. "Staying here, building this life with me." Asha looked at him with those amber eyes that still took his breath away, even after all these years. "Not for a single moment. This is everything I ever dreamed of and more than I thought possible." "I love you," Warren said, words he spoke often but never tired of saying. "I love you too," Asha replied, leaning into him. "Thank you for climbing down from that loft to fetch me a blanket all those years ago." Warren smiled, remembering that cold morning when he had first seen her sleeping in his hay loft, shivering and alone. He had made so many choices since that day, but that first one, the decision to show kindness to someone the world told him was his enemy, had set everything else in motion. "Thank you for accepting it," he said softly. They stood together as the sun set over their farm, over the life they had built together through determination and love. The road had not been easy, and there were still challenges ahead. Prejudice did not disappear overnight, and there would always be those who could not accept what they had created. But standing there with Asha's hand in his and their daughter's laughter ringing through the evening air, Warren knew they had made the right choices. They had taken something that started with a simple act of compassion and transformed it into a legacy. Their farm was more than just land and crops. It was proof that the barriers between people were not as insurmountable as they seemed, that love could grow in the most unlikely places, and that kindness had the power to change the world, one person at a time. As darkness fell, they called Sarah in for dinner, and the small family walked back to their house together. Inside, there was warmth and light and the smell of fresh bread baking. There were books on shelves that both humans and orcs could read, decorations that celebrated both cultures, and photographs of their growing community of friends and neighbors who had learned to see past differences to the common humanity beneath. Warren closed the door behind them, shutting out the cold night, and looked around at what they had created. This was home. This was family. This was everything that mattered, and it had all started with a blanket offered to someone who needed it by a man who chose compassion over fear. That single moment of kindness had rippled outward, touching lives and changing hearts, proving that even in a world divided by prejudice and hate, love could still find a way to thrive. As they sat down to dinner, Sarah chattering about her day and Ashass smiling at their daughter's enthusiasm, Warren felt a profound sense of peace. The wars were long over, but the real victory was not won on a battlefield. It was won here, in quiet moments of domestic happiness, in the daily choice to build rather than destroy, to love rather than hate. That night, after Sarah was tucked into bed and the house was quiet, Warren and Ashass stood together on their porch, looking out at the stars. The same stars that had witnessed so much violence and bloodshed now looked down on a different kind of world, one that they had helped create. "What are you thinking about?" Ashass asked, her head resting on his shoulder. "I am thinking about how grateful I am," Warren replied. "For you, for Sarah, for this life we have built. I am thinking about that morning when I found you in the barn and how different things could have been if I had made a different choice." "But you did not," Ashass said. "You chose kindness. You chose to see me as a person rather than a monster." "That is who you are, Warren. That is why I love you." "We have done something important here," Warren said. "Maybe not important to the world at large, but important to the people we have helped, to the families we have given hope. That matters." "It does matter," Ashass agreed. "And it will continue to matter. Sarah will grow up knowing that love is not limited by race or species, that kindness is always the right choice. She will carry that lesson forward, and maybe her children will too, until one day the world we have built here is not the exception but the norm." "That is a beautiful thought," Warren said. "It is a beautiful dream," Ashass corrected. "But dreams can become reality if enough people are willing to work for them. We have proven that." They stood together in comfortable silence, two souls who had found each other against all odds and built something lasting from that connection. The journey had been difficult, marked by struggles and setbacks, but it had also been filled with joy and love and the satisfaction of knowing they had made a difference. Inside the house, their daughter slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that she was loved and valued. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, as every day did, but they would face them together, as they always had. The farm would need tending, crops would need harvesting, and there would be neighbors to help and visitors to welcome. But tonight, they simply stood together under the stars, holding each other close, grateful for the life they had built and the love that sustained them through everything. It was not a perfect life, but it was theirs, earned through courage and choice and the simple act of offering a blanket to someone who needed it. And that, Warren thought as he held his wife close, was more than enough. It was everything. Years would continue to pass, seasons would change, and their small community would grow and evolve. But the foundation they had laid, built on love and acceptance, and the radical idea that people from different worlds could build a life together, would endure. It would serve as a beacon for others seeking hope, a testament to what was possible when people chose compassion over fear. The story that had begun with a soldier finding an orc girl sleeping in his hay loft, with the simple decision to climb down and fetch her a blanket, had grown into something far greater than either of them could have imagined. It had become a legacy, a gift to future generations, proof that even in the darkest times, kindness and love could light the way forward. And as Warren and Asha finally went inside to their own bed, to sleep in each other's arms as they had done for 10 years and would do for many more to come, they carried with them the knowledge that they had lived well, loved deeply, and made the world just a little bit better for having been in it. That was all anyone could really ask for, and it was everything they needed.